Welcome to Something to Talk About, where I take all this gear that I've accumulated from way too many years of podcasting, all done in Brantford, I might add. And I basically put all this gear to a good cause. So this is the podcast with a cause. And the cause this time is the Crossing All Bridges. Now, you may have remembered this because when we talked to Dave Levesque, we actually talked a bit about this. And one of the things we said in the interview is this would be a prime opportunity for me to reach out and invite Mr. Phil McColeman. So welcome, Phil.
It's great to be here, Robert.
Now, Crossing All Bridges, that is right here. That is close to home as much as anybody else. So let's get right into that.
Sure.
Why? Why is it so close to home?
Well, I am the very privileged father of a 32-year-old intellectually disabled son, and Crossing All Bridges Learning Center is the full name of the organization, has been very instrumental in his life to fill the gap once he aged out of the formal education system, secondary school, and obviously not eligible to go to post-secondary. But this was started some 16 plus years ago now by 4 moms who wanted more for their intellectually disabled children. And so he's thrived there, grown, and it is a special place.
Yeah.
And there's, just add into that, there's now from 16 years from starting with basically 4 families, now we're up to over 70. So
yeah. And to your point, he would have had that, the better part of his adult life, and if that wasn't there, because we brought it up when we talked with Dave, a lot of them fall apart after the formal education because there's nothing there to keep them. Yeah, the construct, for lack of a better term. There's proper terms. Maybe you can educate me as we go along.
Well, I don't know if there are proper terms because every one of them is quite individual.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the system itself just basically they fall off the cliff when they hit that magic age of 21 in this situation where they have nowhere to go other than just basically sitting at home, many of them in the basement of the house, watching movies, their favorite movies over and over again. They have a hard time with peer groups, so they don't have a lot of people they can pick the phone up who are similar in age or friends they've grown up with, like, most kids without disabilities, or like we have 3 children who are 3 girls who are older than Jordan, and their lives were completely different. They had a peer group and a friendship group and all of that, and they hung out and they did the things that you do when you're growing up. But this is a very different type of life that these guys have to lead. And so, yeah, this was absolutely necessary. And we all talk about both, in all the community about lifelong learning. Well, that's what this was all about, is providing these special people with the opportunity for lifetime learning.
Because I've seen, obviously, Jordan, at multiple events, because, he's a member of the community in the pure sense of the word, right? Yeah. And I can see the smile on his face. I can see the happiness. And, once again, the conversation back today, a sense of purpose. Yeah. It's not about the paycheck, to a degree it is. Trust me, being able to pay your own way on certain things goes a very long way at any age, trust me, right? But that sense of purpose, and more importantly, that ability to continue learning and to give that brain something, to do, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Because as someone that has had his brain work against him on numerous occasions, it could go very bad very quickly.
Yeah.
So I love when I hear stuff like this, because I've seen the outcome, and I can only imagine what, and I'll be specific to Jordan, but if a place like that did not exist in Brantford for Jordan,
right,
what would that outcome be? Because I've seen the man that he's become,
yeah.
And I truly mean that.
I know.
One of the things that you and Dave have done together, and I want to clarify this because this is a lot of Brantford stories that weave together nicely. Lifelong friends.
We grew up together in our teen years. We really didn't know. We grew up in different parts of the city. Dave in the Eagle Place part of the city, the district, and I grew up in the Tollgate Road north end of the city. But where we became familiar with each other was really on the sporting fields of Brantford, because he was a pretty talented in his youth athlete, and I was as well. So we competed a lot against each other, and we knew of each other. We weren't really, we went to different high schools. He went to Pauline Johnson, I went to BCI, and but we met each other on the court and on the field. And so when what
Mhm.
the next stage of that was when we graduated high school. We had no idea, but we ran into each other at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, and I'm looking at him and saying, "What are you doing here?" And he's looking at me saying, "What are you doing here?" And so we had both enrolled and didn't know each other. And he played varsity basketball at Laurier, and I played varsity hockey. So we became friends through that small campus that it was in the day. It was like about 18, it was like a large high school with 1,800 students. And so we were part of the athletic really well there. And then the friendship grew beyond that.
Yeah, so the roots obviously were the city, but really it was your university years that really formed the relationship.
It really did, yeah.
And I could only imagine the two of you not only playing sports, but probably having some shenanigans to go with that. And you're grinning right now, so I'm not even going to press for details. Obviously, that relationship is still to this day, because one of the many things that we talked about was the acquisition of what you're calling the permanent home.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about that.
Well, the organization, Crossing All Bridges, had been living at a lease space for their 16 years prior. And it got to the point where, first of all, they were cramped for space because they grew so rapidly, and they've had a lot of success. And so there was this issue of just having floor space to accommodate them in the rented facilities. And then there's the big issue of the cost of renting. And so what we had set out as a goal for the organization, a number of people involved, was to find a home of their own. And so what came along was the opportunity to purchase a vacant and surplus elementary school, a small one, St. Bernard's on Sky Acres Drive. And we were able to work with the contractor that had purchased it from the school board. So he made it available to us out of his goodness and his philanthropic desires.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are today, raising money in the community. Dave and I are co-chairing an effort to raise $2.5 million to be able to purchase it and also do the basic repairs that the building needs.
Because at the end of the day, you don't want them to be house poor, for lack of a better term.
Right.
This is something that, if done properly, and from what I can tell, it is going to set them up for the next generation and then some. And that is spectacular to hear. Now, are they bringing the business side to that location as well, or is that going to be run out of different locations, specifically the shredding business?
Shredding business, yeah. No, it's right there in that facility. So we were able to take a portion of the building that previously was a very large kindergarten room, and we were able to put the access overhead door in the back and build a little small office within the space. And they started out with one shredding machine. Now they have two because business is going so well, and they're employing 16 of these special individuals, including my son. And it's just an amazingly rewarding opportunity, or social enterprise. It's really a social enterprise, and any money that they will make will go right back into building the programs within Crossing All Bridges. So it's just one of those things that's been a huge win, Robert.
Yeah, it's, as someone that when I moved here, I was using the term social business mentor, and we were using it more for the corporate side. So this is retooling modern business, whatnot. But it was moving to Brantford that actually introduced me to the true nature of social enterprise, because the term obviously existed before. And whenever I see a true social enterprise and a modern day business gel together and be called a social enterprise, I go, not out of self pride or anything like that. It's like they exist. I'm so thrilled to see that they exist, and to see them thrive, because not only has the school grown to capacity and excess capacity. But the business, now you also have a partnership with them where you host a couple events a year, or is it just the one a year?
We do one shredding event a
Right.
year, a community shredding event.
Yeah, and once again, just getting a little bit more of that word out there, because we all know marketing
Yes.
is tough to get people's attention. So the more you can make it available to people, it's a nice
Yeah.
funnel, for lack of a better term, into a cause at the end of the day.
Yeah, you mentioned something at the start of our conversation here about this place giving people purpose,
Mm,
and that's exactly what it does.
yeah.
It's the perfect word, because when Jordan wakes up in the morning and he knows he's on a shift at Crossing All Bridges, and he takes 2 shifts a week, um, he is so focused and excited,
Yeah.
and it gives him a reason to get out there and do what he can do. And the day he brought home his first paycheck, which I think was
Mm,
something like $46, he was just bursting with happiness that he earned that
mhm.
money.
Yeah.
And you think about your first jobs and our first jobs when we were growing up. There's nothing like that. There's nothing like the feeling of accomplishment and personal self-worth
Yeah.
that you get from that. And so this is putting a new dimension into a lot of these very special people's lives.
Yeah, and like I said, I brought this up with Dave, so it's not necessarily a secret. Not that I want to, publicize it much, but I've had obviously a lot of mental issues myself in my life, and a lot of it has come down to lack of purpose or lack of passion.
Yes.
And one of the things I did this year, because I turned 50, so you do everything when you're 50, right? Everything changes. It's so true. Hot flashes. They told me about these for women, not for men. In any case, my point being, I told myself I'm just going to pick something finally. I'm going to say, this is my purpose. This is my passion. I'm not going to spend 20 more years of my life struggling with that. And the second I made those decisions, as stupid as they may have turned out to be, it settled that argument.
Sure.
It settled that imbalance, and it gave me focus, and it gave me, it removed a lot of the demons for myself. But when a lot of those same attributes play into whether or not it's millennials finding something in the modern life, or people that have been in a career for 30, 40 years looking at what am I doing after I retire from this, it always comes down to purpose and passion. Now, Jordan has passion like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
It's like everything else, you almost make up for it in many ways, right?
Yeah.
So to have that purpose and passion,
Yeah.
trust me, I say this as a human being, I get it.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah,
It is very huge. Now, this place is not cheap.
Oh.
And now you are going to do something that you said you weren't going to do ever again. It was going to be the last one, and then the crowd started clapping and wanted an encore, right?
Well,
So hockey night in Brantford. Now, historically, I want to get into the history, because I can just do a simple pass on it, but there's depth here. Okay, so let's go back, way back.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to do this right. You're a goaltender yourself. You've got a scholarship. Hockey's in your blood.
Yeah.
Tell me about Phil, hockey, Brantford, and bring it all the way to today, for lack of a better term.
Well, not dissimilar from most Canadian kids, or a lot of Canadian kids. I grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s playing hockey and dreaming one day of having a professional career. And so, worked hard, played on, in those days, what were called all-star teams that represented the city. And eventually, ended up in junior hockey, playing junior B, and here around different communities in this area. And was able to parlay that into a scholarship in the United States for my education. So I've got my graduate education through hockey. And so that's kind of the quick synopsis of my history background. Or my hockey history background. So when I saw this template to do a charity game of this nature, it was just an automatic. This is too easy. It's like it fits right into my wheelhouse. I love hockey, and so what a colleague of mine had done is held a summer hockey game, called it Hockey Night in Barrie, and he had invited me to play in it, and I had played, and he brought in a lot of the NHL alumni and current NHL players who were in the Barrie, kind of north of Barrie, cottage country area of Muskoka where they spent their summers.
Mhm.
And so I just kind of studied it, and I said, we need to do this in our community. And that's how it really, that was the genesis of it, Robert. And so, yeah, we went for a 6-year run. We raised and gave to charity in the community over $550,000 in 6 years. There was fatigue of the organizing committee set in. I didn't do a good job, or we didn't do a good job of succession planning in terms of the
It's
people
tough.
coming on to take it over. In terms of organizing, it's a big job to organize, and so we went for the gusto in our last go around, and had a great kind of final game 2 years ago, and then because of this cause now to raise $2.5 million, Dave and I were sitting down over Christmas and saying, what event could we pull off in 2019 that could generate a 6-figure net profit or net amount that we could give to charity, and would it be possible to give that to Crossing All Bridges for their campaign? So that's how we conceived it, and so we got approval, or at least I needed to get approval from the Ottawa ethics commissioner that I could do something like this, because there is a direct connection with my son, obviously. And I went through the ethics commissioner in Ottawa to make sure there wasn't any conflicts, and got a green light from them. And so here we are today, and we're going to call it, or we have called it, the Encore game. And so it's a game that will feature some of the best talent in the Brantford area, both currently playing professional hockey and also up and comers. The kind of the people who are our captains and stars of the past are coming back. So that's Adam Henrique from Burford, Zach Dalpe from Paris, Ontario, and Brandon Montour from Six Nations. And we've got Hunter Jones now, who's just been drafted. He's played goal in past years. He's going to come back and play goal, provided that he doesn't have to be at training camp somewhere. And we've also have some elite women players, females players, who are playing at the highest levels. We've had, in the past games, we've had 2 Olympians who've played on Canada's Olympic team, the women's Olympic team. So it attracts a really high level of talent, and we have a lot of fun. Kind of, we condense it to 2 periods of hockey. The second period becomes very competitive.
They are who they are.
The competitive juices start to flow, and the last 10 minutes they play pretty hard to just for the rights to say that they beat the other guys or the other team, and so it's become a really, really fun event, and the community has supported it tremendously, and that's witnessing that support is how we raised over $500,000 in the 6 years we've done it previously.
Well, and also, this is a hockey city in more ways than one. Speaking of which, assuming he's healthy and whatnot, Walter will probably do a puck drop, would be my guess, or has traditionally in the past, would be.
Yeah, he's always been there. We've always asked him to be part of the opening ceremonies of dropping the puck, and then he's usually behind the bench with a couple of other coaches. But the other little anecdote here is that Walter Gretzky was my coach in junior B hockey when I was 16 years old, and Wayne Gretzky at the time was an 11-year-old stick boy for that team. And so I remind Wayne when I talk to him, and I do have a relationship with Wayne where we chat, and and we always laugh about it, and chuckle and reminisce about those days of him growing up. But yeah, Walter goes back in, and I typically never use his first name. I just call him Coach.
Yeah, it's he is such an icon in this city, and ambassador, and I've been fortunate to have interviewed him, which it's one of those highlights of my career. I truly mean that, and it was episode 99, which was even better, right? And I've always said this, and I don't know who coined him. Who knows? I might have, but Wayne may be the great one, but Walter is so the grateful one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe on that note, Walter, because honestly, I'd love to know Walter then and now.
Well,
you have that gap because I don't have that.
Yeah, Walter was a very intense man in his in his midlife, and smoked like a chimney.
They both did,
and was very intense and very introverted in many ways. And then after his aneurysm, it was just a total new Walter that emerged, and he became an extrovert, and he lost a section of memory,
20 years,
of his life, and he is here. Here's how I usually describe our community when I get the opportunity to weave it into
please do
comments and speeches. Is I think Brantford and Brant are one of the most shining, wonderful qualities of our culture is a healthy humility. And it is about, just as you just showed me on your tattoo, staying humble. It is, and if there's one family that epitomizes that, it's the Gretzky family. And I can tell you, I've been recently in the last several months with Wayne at 2 events, and he's given speeches, and in the aftermath of the speeches, I'm listening to people in the hallway as they exit and they leave, and they are commenting back and forth, saying, "Can you believe the humility?" And so this is an exceptional family. All the kids, the parents, and it epitomizes really what Brantford, the really wonderful culture of our city, is based upon, because people came here, turn of the century, immigrated, and worked blue-collar jobs in factories. And generally, the next generation did the same thing. They followed in the parents' footsteps. And we have this wonderful sense about not thinking we are the greatest, or that we've got to, go out and pound our chests about who we are. And you see that through and through in the community. And it's not just the Gretzkys. I set them as
they are an embodiment that is known,
but it's everywhere. You get a sense of it just about in every social circle in this community. I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the general feeling in this city is very, very different than a lot of other cities of this size and this nature.
Yeah, when I moved here from Toronto, and I sometimes forget the Rob of 10 years ago, and you just saw the car, so a completely different person. But Brantford changed me in so many different ways, not all good. There's a lot of bits that I really heard, but for the most part, I look at the last 10 years and the conversations that I've had, and I can't understate, when you've had 200-300 of these interviews with local residents, the story weaves, the patterns emerge, all these things. And there's one thing I've seen time and through. For someone that came here touting social business, back to what we were saying, there is a lot of charity. There is a lot of giving, there's just a lot of good down to earth. How many places in the world, and I'm going to be, tattoo it. How many places in the world could I have an MP, an MPP, a Speaker of a House, a 13-time world championship, a world stilt record holder, Randy Papple, Band-Aid the Clown, all in my basement on an ask?
Yeah.
Okay. Regardless of politics, regardless of patterns or whatnot, it was a yes.
Sure.
The amount of people that have said no to me in the last 10 years for a good chat is a handful.
Yeah.
And I think every one of those conversations, for the most part, have a common theme, which is the Brantford vibe, and I have a love-hate relationship. Trust me, we all, I think, to a degree have.
Sure.
But I cannot be more grateful for some of the things that this city has given me personally. And part of that is the Walter story. When I first bumped into him, I told him, it's like, I don't know what you were before. I generally don't. I'm not from here, but I pretty much know who you are now. And I'll be honest, I'm grateful that I've got to see that for the last 10 years, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something to be said. And I think when you look at the names that you brought up, like, Zach and whatnot, they're probably all fairly humble. Like,
Yeah.
like they're Brantford native, Paris native, Six Nations. There's certain salt of the earth type something about that location. And a lot of people will say it's the Grand River to a degree. There is something about the water. Now, I'm not talking about what's coming from Cambridge, but there's something about this area. Like the first thing I did when I moved here, no word of lie, and I know I strained from the thing here, is that I took off my shoes and I stepped in my backyard and I had grass at my feet for the first time in 20 years.
Yeah.
The trails around here are just spectacular. So, when we hear about sports in this area, this is a spectacular training ground in more ways than one. And I know Walter jokes about the fact that he built the rink out of self-sustainment because he didn't want to be cold, but there is that basic, if I want to get up and run, I get up and I can run.
Yeah. Listen, we were born with those great values of working hard, overcoming adversity, and excelling, doing the best with your God-given gifts. And, that was kind of the basic core values that we grow up with, that the community grew up with, and many in the community. And of course, many went on to great success, and their success never went to their heads. They were always, back here in Brantford, and you'd see them and they'd be as open and welcoming when they came back. Like, I'll give you another example. A wonderful man who I played hockey with and made it to the NHL and has like 6 Stanley Cup rings. I'm talking about Doug Jarvis. Okay. And Doug is my age, 65, and Doug came back and played in hockey, one of the second hockey night in Brantford game, and I'm telling you, the kind of real character that's inside of him just exuded that night, and people recognized it, and what a fine man he is. And here he had, all of this fame with the Montreal Canadiens through the years, and then he's still even coaching to this day in the NHL, or he's assisting in the coaching team out in Vancouver. He was in Boston for many years. I went down and we saw him there for a couple of times. But this is the kind of stock that comes out of Brantford, and there's many others, that I can go on to talk about that I grew up with. So maybe Dave Levac does have a point. It could be the water, but I like to think it's more the kind of values we were raised with. Yeah. And many individuals went on to great fame, but again, never let that overcome their sense of thankfulness and gratefulness.
Yeah, I'll be honest. When I moved here versus what I am now, to a degree, this tattoo was not on my arm 10 years ago, so that should tell you something right there. I did not have the benefits, for lack of a better term, of growing up here. I don't have all the backstories and all the relationships. But I genuinely feel like I've skimmed that secret sauce to a degree and try to imbue some of it, because I could not see myself going back. Brantford has had that impact on me.